So the first week concluded with this list of questions which are now being written up and which are very much addressed to the question of immediate questions of action, what we want to do. So obviously one thing we may come out with from this second week's workshop is a whole new lot of questions which might perhaps be more coming at it from the modelling point of view, and the question. But what I would like to do in the rather limited time we have left this afternoon is to look forward and to say that the point of showing you this is to show that there are a whole lot of streams of thinking that could lead into collaborative research, which we'd like to promote, and the practical organizational question is how do we best organize that? And the organizers already discussed that a bit, and we've come up with some sort of outline answers, but we'd like you to participate in turning that into a successful program between now and August. And I'd like Valerie to introduce us to our thinking and to tell you how you can take part.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. Well, I'm going to try. So the first thought is that we need to take forward that list that Dennis has just put up briefly, which will be in the Slack channel, presumably. It's in the document anyway, but it's quite nice to have that extraction and think whether we want a sort of a separate and comparable sort of list from the current week, or whether we merge the two, or some mixture. So one is the questions that have come out of the 2 weeks and how we take those forward. So our thoughts about the direction of travel are broadly that we would think about pursuing probably 4 themes in parallel, sort of 4 work streams. 4 because it's a bit arbitrary, but it sort of seems a manageable number. So if we could either group the current ideas into 4 groups, or maybe leave some of them for later. Obviously, this is an initial thought and things will evolve over time. So they're not in any way set in stone, but if we could identify 4 streams that people would be interested in following through and like to work on, that would be good. We'd envisage this starting the week after next. And those work streams would then carry on. Let's say they would go on in parallel, but there would also be talks and plenary sessions and so on as appropriate. We'll try and send a bit more information about our thinking as to how this might work over the weekend. But if you'd like to start thinking and feeding in ideas, that would be good. For next week, we thought you might appreciate time to recover from these 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Because it's all been quite hectic. Monday in the UK is a public holiday, and next week is half term, which means those who are homeschooling will be home half-terming rather than homeschooling. So people's domestic constraints may change a bit, but we wanted to use the time really for discussion on the way forward, and probably also to have a few talks and other activities. But we thought we could start that off on Tuesday. As I say, Monday's a public holiday, so the Newton staff won't be available then. But on Tuesday, we could have both morning and afternoon, in the hope that most people can do one or the other. You're not expecting you to do both. Just sort of coffee discussions. So a morning one starting about 10:45, going on to about midday, with a coffee and a breakout session and a gathering together again, and a similar one in the afternoon starting about 3:15, going on till about 4:30. Those will be opportunities to try and home in on what these 4 streams would be.
So Valerie, Could you clarify? So first I heard you say that next week is recovery, which I thought meant we don't do anything, but now you're saying that
we
next
thought
Tuesday is we're going to have coffee together?
We thought you'd miss us. So, yeah, so we thought, I mean, you know, it's all arbitrary, but entirely optional. But in order to really to identify what people would like to do going forward, what they would like to work on, we thought, you know, to start with a couple of discussions. If the idea for having them early-ish in the week is that gives us a few days to really start planning, so that we might start for real in the following week at the beginning of June. Okay. We'd also, I mean, we're conscious that various ideas for talks for the last 2 weeks came up, and for one reason or another they didn't happen. People weren't available, couldn't be fitted into the schedule or whatever. If there are any that we should be following up on, can you remind us of those, please? Because maybe we can pick up on a few of those next week or in the following weeks. The one thing I thought some people will be aware of, others won't. But I noticed that the Turing Institute, I'm not sure whether some of the UK people will know all about the Turing Institute. Overseas, I'm not so sure. It's the National Institute for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence. They have a webinar next Thursday afternoon, that's the 28th. It's at 2 p.m. UK time. It's called Data Privacy and Public Health, Countering COVID-19 with Technology and Trust. And it's some sort of discussion. If you're interested, it's freely available, but you do have to register. So you'd need to look on the Turing website. That would just something that people might be interested in. But hopefully we will fix some things specific to us. More widely, sorry, I've nearly finished. More widely, we really want suggestions, not only for sort of topics and talks, but also how best to manage the workshop. We're all learning pretty fast on our feet, or at least I hope we are, but there are some big issues. And one is how best to enable small group working. That's something we haven't, apart from just having these breakout groups, we haven't really addressed really working properly and using the other facilities that the Newtons put in place. And the other thing was managing time zones. It's very easy for those of us who are sitting in Western Europe. But are there things we could do, specific activities to enable people in the, well, west coast of the US, Australia, New Zealand, to interact better? Obviously the best times for you guys are likely to be in the middle of the night, which is not a good time for having Newton staff available. But if there are suggestions for ways that we can make things better and be more inclusive, that would be really good. Okay, that's all I want to say. So I think what we're really asking for are ideas, but from you for all these sort of things, but mainly and principally the themes that we should all try and focus around over the next few weeks. Questions or comments or ideas, please. Peter has put his hand up, but that might be left over from some earlier hand. Martina.
Yeah, it was an earlier end, yeah.
Okay. So I guess really question, so with a asterisk themes, coming up with those, it's hard, I'm having a hard time imagining how that will work. It seems in some ways as though we would want to do that as an entire group, right? One or more discussions, as opposed to breaking up into what we think might be preliminary groups. So what are you thinking about that?
I think the idea is that although I said they were parallel, they wouldn't take place at the same time. So, so
That's an interesting idea.
yes, so parallel in the sense that they're all starting together and moving forward together, but over the week they would be separated. In principle, somebody, I think, the way we've been thinking of it, could be attend every session, but it would be pretty full on. If it's thought that everybody wants to attend everything, that might affect how we timetabling it. But we weren't necessarily trying to sort of say they will take place. I don't think that Newton is really set up, as far as I'm aware, to have two completely independent things going on absolutely simultaneously. So I think we were thinking of, one topic A might be this morning and this afternoon. I mean, more, Monday morning, Tuesday afternoon, whatever it happened to be, and another one would be, I think we've only ever been thinking about the sort of half a day thing. So it would probably, the two things would work over 2 weeks. There was a bit of an idea of coming up with a timetable, but certainly in principle, everybody would be able to attend everything. Dennis?
I think it's trying to give people trying out having a slightly regular timetable so that people will find that the ones that meet on Tuesday mornings and Wednesday afternoons are the ones they're most interested in, and perhaps they have some interest in ones happening in 2 other half days a week. But I think, it may be that for some of these people will want to keep on meeting, all of the people interested in what's in that particular box. But it may be that actually that people decide that, well, there are really 3 topics we've tried to put in that box, but there are really 3 separate topics. Or they may decide that actually to remix what they're defining as a topic, and they may spend most of their time in smaller groups. In many ways, if they spend most of their time in smaller groups, that's great. But I think it's nice to have some kind of structure for getting together every now and then, so that we get a bit of mixing, so that rather than just going off into small isolated groups. So I describe it as I think what we're looking for is an intervention strategy, which is the opposite of what you want for an epidemic. We're trying to spread ideas, so we're trying to spread them we're trying to make sure they spread as much as possible. So I think that's the way to think of it. So it's we've got a network of now involving over 100 people, and we're trying to make ideas spread across that as rapidly and get infecting people other sides of that network as fast as possible. So it's the opposite of a epidemic intervention strategy. So maybe there's some nice kind of duality theorem. If we can find the right way to do that, then its dual will be a very good intervention for stopping pandemics. Have any questions or suggestions? I think we may be asking quite a large question, but it would be very nice if people would. So we have a plenary at 4:30. So why don't we all, unless there are any pressing questions here, why don't we all take our fairly long break before the plenary lecture at 4:30? But if you could go away and sometime over the weekend discuss with each other, or just have your own ideas. And as Valerie has said, we have a sort of draft idea, putting a little bit of flesh on the bones of what Valerie's outlined there, and we'll try and email that round to you in the next day or two, and just have a look at that. And we'd really welcome suggestions of how to take a whole lot of disparate possible research themes and stick them, just for the purposes of organizing a timetable, stick them into 4 boxes to start off with. And if people could do that, if possible, before Tuesday, then we'll have these 1 morning, 1 afternoon session, like the virtual coffee room we've been having, in which we can maybe discuss them a bit further. So thanks everyone very, very much for participating in the workshop, and I expect maybe to see you at the plenary lecture at 4:30.
Could I just, before Dennis mutes us all again, or whatever he's going to do, could I just particularly thank Dennis, also Martina and Peter and Gianpaolo, who've with Dennis organised this week. But Dennis has played a huge role, so I think we all owe him a vote of thanks. So,
oh, thank you very much. Okay, see you all at 4:30.
Yes.